Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at the 2020 electoral map if Donald Trump keeps his promises up until the 2020 election. So we're about a year and a half away from the actual 2020 election, and it seems like Donald Trump was just elected yesterday, but we're going to be talking about the question as to whether or not if Donald Trump keeps his promises, will he still win the election? And the simple answer for me, I would say, is yes. Absolutely, if he's able to keep a number of these promises, he's definitely going to win re-election. But the question is by how much? If we're looking at a general electoral map, typically it favors the Democratic Party because of how many states vote in favor of the Democrats and how heavily weighted they are in the Electoral College. Right now, looking at a number of these states, there are some states that are currently on edge between Donald Trump and potential Democrats that definitely could be swayed a little bit more in favor of the president if he does indeed keep his promises. So we start off with a 0-0 map, as always, but let's go ahead and characterize the safe Republican states. These are the same states that always vote for the GOP regardless of the election or the candidate for most of the time, except with exceptions like 2008 with John McCain in Indiana. But typically these are very quote-unquote safe Republican states. A total of 125 electoral votes. I will be using the lean, likely, and safe margin, which means the safe is the dark red. The safe is the darkest red. Lighter than that is the likely, and then it goes down to lean. And there's actually a tilt, which I probably won't be utilizing in this video, considering that if Donald Trump does keep his promises, he's probably going to win most of the states that he wins by lean or larger. So 125 electoral votes, but it's not to say that there aren't quote-unquote safe Democratic states. Some of these states definitely are going to take a change from safe to possibly likely or even lean as we get through this video, but these are the same states that we generally characterize as safe Democratic states. Looking at a number of these states, including states like Virginia and New Mexico, these states have now become safe Democratic states based off previous elections, though it's not impossible for Trump to win here, and Virginia is a whole other argument in terms of it being quote-unquote a safe Democratic state. That one, as of right now, we know is going to be pretty solid for the Democrats, but I'm actually going to remove Virginia from the safe Democratic column just for right now, and that puts the Democrats at a total of 187 safe electoral votes, Donald Trump at 125, but again, this is a scenario where Donald Trump keeps his promises. It's not going to go the best way. He's not going to win every single swing state if this does occur, because of course there are some swing states that are still probably not going to vote in favor of the president, and they probably didn't back in 2016. But looking at a number of these states, they probably will vote in favor of the president, depending on whether or not he keeps his promises. So let's think about his major promises that are going to be extremely important, such as building the wall. Hillary Clinton being locked up wasn't super important, but again, we could potentially throw that in there. A number of things relating to the economy, which the economy is doing pretty well here. If we look at the president of the United States, he's doing an amazing job with the economy, and there's a whole lot of arguments as to whether or not that's attributed to Obama or attributed to President Trump. But Trump's been in office for about 3 years now. You really can't just throw away. He's a businessman. He knows how to run the economy, and that's something that's really going to resonate with a number of these voters. If you look at the Rust Belt, the most important issue to them wasn't necessarily immigration. It wasn't just healthcare, but the economy. It was definitely something there. Job growth in the Rust Belt, which has gotten a lot more stagnant as the years have progressed. If you look, Obama did bail out, I believe, in the state of Michigan, the auto industry, and that was something that really helped out the state itself, but it was still pretty slow in terms of job growth there, if not on a decline in some of the specific counties. And if we're looking at where Trump, put quote-unquote America first and pushed for American jobs on American soil, that's something that really resonated with a number of these voters, something that Hillary Clinton could really not tap into, and she completely disregarded these states as well. Donald Trump, if he does keep his promises, number one, keeps his base happy and also inspires more independents to vote for him. If you look at 2016, he made a number of promises. Nobody's really keeping, there are obviously people keeping track, but the average voter doesn't remember every single promise Donald Trump made. They remember the build the wall part, they remember the lock Hillary Clinton up. So things like that definitely take precedence in terms of all of his campaign promises. The minor ones that I guess that aren't as important as something like building the wall probably won't be remembered as easily, but when we're talking about promises, we're just assuming that Donald Trump is able to keep his key core promises for the GOP as he promised when he would be elected. So Start off with some of these states. The state of Texas could actually be safe for Donald Trump, though it is a state that could possibly get closer in 2020. If Donald Trump is able to keep his promises, he's probably going to hold on to the state of Texas and expand on his voting base there. Keep in mind, they were very apprehensive in voting for him. If you look at Mitt Romney's numbers 4 years before Donald Trump's election, yes, there was an impact of immigration and changes in, voting trends. But if you look at the state of Texas, it's still a Republican state. There's no reason as to why someone like Donald Trump can win in Michigan but lose voters in Texas. The fact that Iowa went to Trump more than the state of Texas is astonishing, considering that Barack Obama did phenomenal in Iowa compared to Hillary Clinton and did not do so well in Texas compared to Hillary Clinton. And if we're looking at a number of these states like Georgia and North Carolina really like Mitt Romney type candidates, but we're a little bit on the edge about Donald Trump. Let's go ahead and characterize the state of Georgia as of right now. I would say this one's actually a likely state. Donald Trump, if he's able to keep his promises, is going to hold on to his base, which won him here in the first time, and then get more independent voters. I do think he would definitely gain voters if he's able to keep his promises, which means that they would probably assume that all of his promises he makes in 2020 would be fulfilled as they were in 2016 up until now. And if we look at some surrounding states, North Carolina would also be a likely state in favor of the GOP. Donald Trump would definitely do very well in these states, and very well in the states of Georgia and North Carolina, and it would be enough to keep both of these states in the likely column. Now, going over to a state like Iowa and Ohio, these two states I still think would stay in the likely Republican column. That puts Donald Trump closer and closer to the White House. We're going to characterize Nebraska's 2nd district right now as a likely district, but that puts Donald Trump at 219 electoral votes. He has now surpassed the Democrats, but winning in Ohio and Iowa definitely says a lot. He was able to win both of those states by a pretty large margin. I think 8% for Ohio, 9% for Iowa. But this time around, we could possibly see a 12-13% margin, which still is not safe in terms of the way that I characterize the electoral map, but still enough to keep him in there. And that puts him at 219 electoral votes. The Democrats are at 187. If we go to Maine's 2nd district, that one would definitely be safe in favor of Donald Trump, adding to his total numbers of 220. That leaves 131 toss-up electoral votes. Now let's think about it. Well, a number of these swing states are swing states. I mean, they have an equal Democratic, Republican, and independent distribution. And if we're looking at the general idea for Donald Trump in these states, he's definitely going to be focusing on the Rust Belt. And keep in mind, he has kept a number of his promises that he made to the Rust Belt. He's been visiting there pretty often, and a lot of the things that were important to them, he was able to accomplish. Maybe not everything, but you do have to give him some credit in terms of things such as NAFTA or just the economic growth, which, though it may not seem too important to Rust Belt voters, he could definitely perpetuate that message and get it across to these voters that he is helping them. And also, if he's keeping all of his other promises, it would assume that the Rust Belt is, flourishing. And 220 electoral votes for Donald Trump, 187 for the Democratic Party. I would think Arizona actually would go into the likely column, though it was a lean state in 2016. It could be a likely state in 2020, and it is a very real possibility if he's able to keep his promises. Joined by the state of Florida, though it's always a swing state, there's no guarantee that it gets closer in 2020, especially in a scenario where Donald Trump is able to keep his promises. Keep in mind, he won it back in 2016 by a pretty large amount compared to what Barack Obama got in 2012. And if we're also looking at the overall amount of voters there, that number one really like the president in both the primaries and the general election, it doesn't seem like he's going to lose, number one, any voters. In fact, he definitely would gain voters. And that puts him at 260 electoral votes, the Democrats at 187, and the toss-up is at 91 electoral votes. Obviously, Donald Trump is going to win this election, but again, the margin definitely matters. If we're looking at states like Virginia and Colorado. Colorado right now I would put in the tilt Democratic column. I do think that it is going to remain in the Republican column regardless as to whether or not Donald Trump is able to keep his promises. Again, the margins definitely matter. I do think that the Democrats are going to going to hold on to Colorado by a very narrow margin. But obviously, Donald Trump is going to carry these states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They're states that are going to go to Donald Trump by a pretty large margin. Wisconsin probably the largest out of them all, and that puts him exactly where he was in 2016, 306 electoral votes. But the Democrats are not at where they were in 2016. They're at 196, but still 36 toss-up electoral votes to go. Donald Trump, I do think, could definitely hold on to these Rust Belt states, expanding his lead in all three of them, but just still around 4% in Pennsylvania, 4% in Michigan, and possibly 5-6% in the state of Wisconsin. State of Nevada, too, has always been on edge about voting for a Republican, but I do think that Donald Trump would be able to carry the state of Nevada if he's able to keep his promises. He was doing pretty well in the state of Nevada back in 2016. There's no reason as to why he would lose that state now. especially with all this support behind him. We'll look at Maine at large. I do think that Donald Trump could win Maine at large, but the Democratic Party would still narrowly win Maine's first district. It's a pretty Democratic district, so you can expect that one to go into the Democratic column. That's pretty much expected. 197 electoral votes for the Democrats and 314 for the Republicans. But Minnesota, I would also narrowly add Minnesota. I do think that one could narrowly, and when I say narrowly, I mean very, very close within the tilt region, go to Donald Trump. It's not practically impossible for him to win there in 2020, just very unlikely. But if he's able to keep his promises, it's a very, very real reality that he's able to gain states, and Minnesota could very well be one of them. That puts the Republican Party at 324 electoral votes and the Democrats at 197. But Virginia, typically out of reach, I do think that Donald Trump could narrowly win there. There's no reason as to why Virginia would go to Donald Trump if we're looking at the candidates like Biden and Sanders. But if we're talking about a scenario where Donald Trump is running against a generic type Democrat and he's kept all of his promises, he definitely can resonate to a number of these voters. Colorado is just a little bit more out of reach, considering that you have to factor in, number one, Tim Kaine was the VP in Virginia. That definitely helped Hillary Clinton, so the margin may not be the exact same. And Colorado is a pretty Democratic state on its own, and 2018 and 2016 can attest to that. Looking at the state of New Hampshire, I do think Donald Trump could narrowly win that one as well. And we're also going to go ahead and characterize those quote-unquote safe Democratic states and characterize them as less than that. New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington all become likely states from safe states. States like Connecticut and New Jersey now become likely. Likely, keep in mind, is between 6 to 15%. So it's still a win for the Democratic Party, just still in the likely column. And again, looking at the margins are pretty important when we're looking at an election, especially with this many pickups for the president. So that finalizes this electoral map. This is what the electoral map would look like if Donald Trump kept all of his promises before the end of 2020, before the 2020 election. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.